So what's next for college football? Because we got so many things changing and we have all these storylines around NIL and around conference realignment and all these things that are moving right now. What's next for college football? Where do you see college football in the next 3 years? Thought it was a great question, so we're going to kind of take the bat out here and take a few swings at this thing. The first thing that I think is going to happen, and this might be in the next year or so, I don't have any insight to this. There's a lot of people like Pete Nakos that are more well-versed on this whole thing legally. I think we're headed towards more structure in NIL. And the whole injunction being granted with Tennessee and Virginia, that's just the tip of the iceberg. Everybody understands that. The NCAA is no longer going to be able to oversee the way that NIL operates. And so what that means, I believe, is you're going to have more people get in the room that have a better background to handle NIL. And so when I say more structured, I'm talking like uniform contracts. Heck, we might in the next few years, in my opinion, arrive at a place where we're getting kids signing on signing day, and then we find out what they signed for from a monetary standpoint. I don't think that's too crazy, because when it comes to all this money changing hands, and we've said this for a while now, more structure, more transparency for both sides, that's a good thing. Like paperwork kind of gets a bad rap, contracts kind of get a bad rap because it's like, oh, you don't know what you're signing. Well, if you do know what you're signing, it benefits everybody involved. You know the service you have to provide, and your person who's handing that contract over to you is able to protect themselves as well. So I think it's a good thing. I think we're headed towards that. There's, again, too much money changing hands for this to not be a reality, for us to not have both sides protected by more structure in that world. So I think that's a good thing, and NIL overall I believe is a good thing, because we talk about Johnny Manziel, which is a phenomenal example of this whole thing. He went on a podcast and talked about how he was getting a stipend for $700 while his jersey is selling out at the A&M bookstore for like, I think that sold like $42 million was his estimation of revenue with what Johnny Manziel jerseys were going for. So yeah, benefiting the athletes at this point in college football and college sports is a great thing. Structure, I believe, is headed this way. Now, in terms of structure, we talk about, the NIL space, the conference realignment space, that's continuing to evolve. We're going to call our shot a little bit here. I think the ACC will look drastically different, if not cease to exist in the next 3 years. Now, if you're an ACC team right now, you probably just gasped and said, whoa, you're down on the ACC? I'm not down on the ACC. I don't think those teams cease to exist. I think there's a lot of big brands and big teams in that conference that would land on their feet. But the problem with the ACC right now is, in regards to running a restaurant, who's the one person you want to make sure stays happy in that entire building? The chef. Why? Because they are providing a lot of the product that provides the revenue, right? Well, the chef right now in the ACC is Florida State, and it has been very, very public. They are not happy in the ACC. And so as long as Florida State's not happy, there's going to be an effort to get out of there, and I think it's only a matter of time before push comes to shove and Florida State gets out. And when Florida State gets out of the ACC, they're not going alone. We've seen this in the college football realignment world. Like, very rarely does a team leave singularly. So when they leave, who else is going with them? Probably another big brand, probably a Clemson, probably a Miami. And so what this would eventually amount to, in my opinion, is you would see these people start to, I say these people, I'm still speaking in the restaurant metaphor, you see these different teams start to scatter, and they would find, again, I think a lot of these places, a lot of these teams would find a conference to land with, whether it be a North Carolina or Virginia or Virginia Tech. They'd have a fair amount of suitors, I have to believe. But what would happen then is kind of the second round of what happened to the Pac-12. Musical chair starts, find your spot. If you don't find your spot, that's tough. But I think this even further accelerates the Super League that's going to happen. Cole Kubelik, Andy Staples, they chopped it up on Andy's show, I believe it was this past week, talking about the future, SEC, Big Ten, two just mega conferences with however many double-digit teams are in both of those conferences. I'm talking double digits, like 30-plus teams in each conference. And I think we're, in the next 3 years, I wouldn't be wildly surprised if that ended up being the case. Again, I don't know. I don't have any prediction here or any insight, but that's my feel on this whole thing. Last thing, and this is just something that makes way too much sense. We've seen this for a long time now. A commissioner is just the next step in college football. We have to get a college football commissioner. Why? Because, again, it's too obvious when it comes to the balance of power. The SEC and the Big Ten, they hold all the cards at the table, and more power to them. But the people in charge of the SEC and the Big Ten, Tony Petitti of the Big Ten and Greg Sankey with the SEC, they're acting in the best interest of their employer. That's what they're supposed to do. And so what I would hope happens here in the near future is we get a college football commissioner whose obligation is to the well-being of college football. Now, with that being said, I think the way this would happen is the same way that most big things have happened in the college football world the last couple of seasons. Starts with a little bit of rumble, starts with some support from the college football public, and not just us as fans, but also some folks like, a very visible figure, whether it be a Paul Feinbaum, a Kirk Herbstreit, a Joel Klatt, like someone like that starting to support that publicly, and then would get some radio silence. It'd get some traction, it'd be a talking point. We talk about it on this show, and then it would die down. And out of nowhere, pop, report comes out, hey, so-and-so is being considered to take this position, or they're going to create this position, the college football commissioner effectively, and that would be how that happens. So head on a swivel, I think that's kind of the life cycle that would take on. Some folks would hear this and say, well, JD, isn't that sort of the nail in the coffin for traditional college football? I don't think it has to be, as long as we hire the right person. And I say we, I don't know who we is, but as long as the right person gets that position of power and understands what's made college football, the regular season being special, campuses being special, marching bands, the overall tradition of college football, the pageantry, someone who gets that and can preserve that as best as possible, we would be okay. The right person driving the ship would put us in a good place. But again, like college football as a whole, hurtling towards a professional model, we all see that. We're paying players now. There is a lot going on with the college football playoff format resembling a professional model. Professional sports have commissioners. I am not lobbying for college football to be a professional sport. In fact, I've been on the opposite side of that fence for the entirety of this conversation. But if we're going to go down this road, we got to have someone in charge of the overall entity with the best interests of that entity. So that's where we're headed in college football, in my opinion. Again, I'm not Pete Nakos here with the legal background that he has, but the way that we're looking at this thing, structuring NIL, the ACC is going to look different with Florida State, Miami, and Clemson probably finding new homes, and a commissioner, again, makes too much sense. Balance of power, and hopefully preserving what we love about college football. Hey, y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also, be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.